Welcome to the Global News Podcast from the BBC. I'm Jonat Jalil, and today we're joined by our North America correspondent, Anthony Zerker. And Anthony, we're talking about President Trump's latest tariffs and the pushback against them. 25 US states have filed a lawsuit to try to block them. Why?
Well, they are alleging that these new tariffs are arbitrary and capricious, that they were imposed without reason. That's a legal jargon for essentially accusing this administration of finding some way, any way, to put new tariffs on foreign imports to replace the ones that they had instituted last year. They got struck down by the Supreme Court, and another round of tariffs that expired because there was a limit on them. So they are accusing this federal government of abusing, misinterpreting existing law in order to impose tariffs on 59 countries and the European Union. They say there's no ground for that. They didn't do enough time to research it, because the justification the administration is using is that all of these countries, including the UK and the European Union and China and Japan and South Korea, they all didn't do enough to stop forced labor imports that were derived from forced labor. They said that there was weak justification for this. Of course, the administration counters that they did all the proper fact-finding. This is well within their authority, and these tariffs are going to be here to stay.
But the Trump administration's critics would say, how can you do fact-finding for, 60 or so countries in a matter of weeks?
Yeah, that is going to be what this case is about. It's not about whether the Trump administration has this authority. They imposed similar tariffs on China under Section 301 of this 1974 Trade Act earlier in Donald Trump's term, and those were upheld by the court. So there is grounds, unlike that first Supreme Court case, the first legal challenge, which was really pushing the boundaries. There is grounds for using this tariff action against countries that do rely on forced labor. The question is going to be, is there enough evidence for all of these countries, 59 countries in the EU, and be able to find all of that evidence just in a matter of a couple of months? What the states are alleging is that there was no time for that. And if you look at the tariffs, they match pretty closely what Trump had been trying to do under other laws. So this is just an example of picking up everything they had before that the court struck down and finding a way around it, a new justification.
And it's not just the states that are suing. There are also small businesses bringing cases against the Trump administration.
Right, and the small businesses, some of them are the same small businesses, importers of foreign goods that are sold here in the United States, are the same ones that brought the first lawsuit, the successful lawsuit against Trump. They can certainly draw a line to the direct impact. They're the ones having to pay the tariffs. They're the ones who are having to raise prices. They're the ones who probably see consumer demand for their products go down because of these tariffs. It's a slightly more complicated legal reasoning for states bringing these lawsuits, although what the states will argue is that they also buy imported products. They also have state agencies that rely on imported products. They also rely on income generated revenue, tax revenue coming from these companies within their territory that are paying the tariffs. And if the businesses in their states aren't doing as well, then they don't get as much revenue. And that was an argument that the Supreme Court supported. It allowed them to proceed with their lawsuits the first time around. So I guess it worked once, it'll work again for the states. But for people challenging these tariffs, they want to put forward more sympathetic characters, little companies, little businesses, people struggling to make ends meet. And that's why you see these small businesses also being at the forefront of these lawsuits.
And critics of the Trump administration would say that it's ironic that it's talking about forced labor, because forced labor has long been an issue in the US itself.
Yeah, there are questions. We've heard some countries accuse the United States of relying on prison labor because many of the major prisons in the United States do put their inmates to work. Of course, the United States has close trading relations with China, although there have been tensions between the two countries. The United States still imports a considerable amount of products from China, so you could easily see the same sorts of justifications that the United States is using to impose these tariffs on the 60 different trading partners to also apply to the United States itself. And that, I think, will also be a key part of the case that these tariffs are arbitrary and capricious.
And how long will it take before there's a resolution to this lawsuit?
Well, we saw it take almost a year for the initial legal challenge to Donald Trump's first round of tariffs to make it all the way up to the Supreme Court and to be struck down by the Supreme Court. And in the meantime, those tariffs went into effect and they generated revenue that is now having to be returned to many of these businesses that paid the tariffs. So I think we can't expect a quick resolution on this, particularly since this seems to be a little more of a gray area around this law. There might be more need to get legal fact finding on whether the justification, whether there's justification to impose these tariffs. So I wouldn't hold my breath for a quick resolution. I think we could see some lower courts start to weigh in, the trade court start to weigh in the next few months. But for it to reach a final resolution, and gosh, this probably will get back up to the Supreme Court again at some point, we may be looking at sometime next year.
So, Anthony, taking a step back, what's the impact of these successive rounds of tariffs been on the US economy?
Well, I think if you look at economic studies, it has driven up prices for many products. It's contributed to inflation because these tariffs, the past ones, have been passed along to consumers by and large. There was a certain period of time when prices didn't go up as much as economists predicted, but eventually that did start filtering down because companies whose margins are narrow can't keep swallowing the tariffs. They have to start finding ways to make profits on their imports. So you've seen some impact in prices. You've also seen some push. The Trump administration would argue for major foreign manufacturers trying to find new ways to produce products here in the United States. Donald Trump will regularly tout new auto manufacturing plants that are opening up, new manufacturing plants that they're being built. Of course, the timeline for such things is longer than just months. It takes a long time to stand up new manufacturing facilities in this country. And so while Donald Trump has promised a rebirth of American manufacturing, we haven't seen that in the numbers yet.
Well, given all this, what's the likely impact going to be in the midterm elections in November?
Well, according to public opinion polls, Americans don't like tariffs. They view it as harmful to the economy. They see a direct link between tariffs and inflation and the higher prices at the grocery store and at the shopping centers. And so if anything, it will be a political weight on Donald Trump. His promises that there are long-term benefits to these things. American voters don't typically see things that way. They look for the immediate implications. And so it is yet another piece of economic news that is providing a strong headwind for this president. When you throw in the higher energy prices because of the Iran war, higher agriculture prices because of the trade disputes that Trump has had with China, just the general trend of prices going up across this country. This is just one more piece of that. So it certainly doesn't help in the short term. If you listen to Trump, he will say that the benefits are just around the corner, but that American voters don't vote about what's just around the corner. They vote about conditions on the ground when they go to the ballot box.
Thanks, Anthony. That was Anthony Zerka, our North America correspondent. And if you'd like to hear more from the Global News Podcast, please click on the link below.